Many thanks for inviting me to speak at this virtual Energy Networks Innovation Conference. It doesn't seem so long ago that I was speaking at the LCNI conference in Glasgow last year, but so much has changed all across the world and we still find ourselves in these unusual circumstances of working remotely and relying ever more on technology. COVID-19 has created significant challenges across all parts of society and the economy over the past 10 months, and it's likely that these challenges will be in front of us for some time yet. What's been particularly pleasing for me is the way that the energy networks have responded throughout this year to maintain security of supply and high levels of system reliability, and continue to provide the essential services that consumers have needed more than ever, while ensuring a safe environment for your staff and customers. On the back of this strong performance, there's also been a huge amount of work undertaken with the networks to drive a green economic recovery, testing new innovative delivery models that will hopefully drive that response and help to bring forward decarbonisation benefits for consumers. This year, we've still seen a huge appetite for innovation across the industry, particularly through the 2020 Network Innovation Competition, with a successful project recently confirmed. Alongside all the smaller scale innovations, we hope each of these projects will help move the dial in some of the big R&D challenges we face and have a real and lasting impact on how the networks can operate in the future. So despite all of the challenges faced, innovation has continued to thrive across the networks, and the work to increase the scale and reach of innovation and to extend partnerships with a wide range of innovators has not stopped. In fact, in some ways, it's had to increase significantly to adapt to this new normal and drive new ways of delivering value for consumers. We've seen, for example, huge progress on data usage and digitization, with the industry forced to develop systems and processes in a way that just wasn't anticipated this time last year. And that's obviously a good thing, because the scale of decarbonisation challenges facing the country remain as big as ever. We have an economy that has been built over nearly 200 years on carbon-based infrastructure. We now have about 30 years to completely remake and reshape that infrastructure so it supports a carbon-free economy by 2050 across the UK and 2045 in Scotland. This will certainly pose challenges, both socio-economic as well as technological. But it also presents some amazing opportunities for new businesses to prosper within the UK and for new business models, new technology and regulatory innovations that are pioneered here to be exported around the world. As Ofgem's Deputy Director leading our work on the electricity distribution price controls and innovation programmes, this is a particularly exciting time to be working in this field. And today I've got a great opportunity to talk to you about how Ofgem sees its role in helping to fight climate change and what this means for our approach to innovation and our RIIO-2 price controls. Now, we know there are multiple pathways to net zero and we don't know how much it will cost to hit the targets. But that doesn't mean we wait for certainty. And at Ofgem, we are clear that decarbonisation at lowest cost is one of our core corporate priorities. At the start of this year, we published a decarbonisation action plan, in which we stated that we consider our duty to protect existing and future consumers very much includes helping to hit the net zero targets passed by parliaments. We said that this equal commitment to protect consumers both now and in the future will be reinforced in every decision we make. But an obvious question is what that actually means in practice. For me, there are three good examples to draw on. First, we want to regulate the energy networks so they can support the 11 million electric vehicles projected to be on our roads by 2030. Second, we want to proactively explore the coordinated expansion of the offshore transmission grid so it may enable a fourfold increase in offshore wind generation by 2030. And third, we want to use our ability to inject innovation funding into the sector to help expand the range of possibilities to support decarbonisation, including testing the range of potential options around the future of heat. Inevitably, this will require an increase in net zero related investments in the grids to make sure that ambitions are not held up by a lack of capacity. But we need to ensure the costs of these investments are kept as low as possible. That means encouraging the networks to be as efficient as they possibly can be on running and financing costs. And it means driving value in very different ways by exploiting the opportunities created by a data-driven transition and those from flexibility markets. By doing this, we can invest to support net zero while making sure that bills are kept affordable for all consumers. We have some exciting RIIO-2 decisions coming out around now and the lead up to Christmas, which will show what this means in practice. And I've no doubt you'll be poring over the detail on those when you get the chance. Given that this is an innovation conference, let me now refocus the lens from the broad Ofgem approach to net zero and zoom in on some of the key issues surrounding the Network Innovation Programme. Innovation is at the heart of our regulatory programme, and we are laser focused on creating an environment that allows innovation to thrive across all parts of the system. Looking at the networks, we are maintaining a very strong stimulus for R&D and innovation, targeted at some of the biggest technological challenges posed by net zero for the networks. In simple terms, this means retaining the core incentives that allow the companies to innovate and develop the new technologies that increase efficiency. It also means retaining the main strategic innovation programs that we have under RIIO-1, covering the Network Innovation Allowances, or NIA, and the Strategic Innovation Fund, which will replace the current Network Innovation Competition. By having both the NIA and the SIF, we are ensuring an appropriate balance between the big transformational R&D projects as well as the smaller scale innovations and processes that often provide the spark for the bigger programs to be successful. We know that innovation funding has been available to the networks for some time now, and it's right that we look to reform how any new funding is targeted. That means a stronger alignment with the key energy transition net zero challenges in power, heat and transport, and on continually improving outcomes for consumers in vulnerable situations. Within this, there are two overarching dimensions underlying our new approach: strategic coordination and flexibility. We know that policy for net zero will not develop in tidy 5-year segments neatly aligned with a RIIO-2 timetable. That's why we're designing a much more agile approach to innovation that allows greater coordination with policymakers and government to ensure that our approach remains supportive of the long-term infrastructure strategy and plans across GB. By doing this, we can ensure innovation activity is lined up proper strategically, with matched funding from a range of sources, and can deliver much better outcomes for consumers. The role of third-party innovators and SMEs is also critical. Although our innovation funding sits within the energy networks, we absolutely know that some of the brightest new ideas could come from outside the companies. So we'll continue to promote an approach that harnesses that collaboration and increases the reach of innovation programme as wide as we possibly can. The second dimension is about a much more flexible approach. The first aspect of this relates to funding. Given the uncertainty of net zero pathways and costs, we need more flexibility to dial allowances for investment or innovation up or down as policy for net zero continues to evolve for any of the networks anytime. So for example, while the starting value of the Strategic Innovation Fund will be equivalent to RIIO-1 levels, we will have the ability to flex that based on need and value for money. The second dimension is about the flexibility of our processes. The RIIO-1 model has been an undoubted success, but there is room to improve how the mechanisms work. In RIIO-1, this could feel quite stop-start and bottom-up. Now it'll be more top-down and strategically organised, so key R&D problems can be addressed much quicker and more directly and help produce an organised response from industry. So in both these respects, our Network Innovation Programme will be materially different to the previous price controls. I'd also like to say a little bit more on the Network Innovation Allowances and what we're looking for in the RIIO-2 controls. As I said previously, we see the importance of smaller scale innovations and technological processes, especially in the context of a shorter 5-year price control and fostering engagement with SMEs and other disruptive innovators. But again, we need to evolve the model so consumers get better value. First, we are dealing with fragmentation risk by primarily focusing on projects solving problems related to energy system transition and consumer vulnerability. Second, we expect the companies to embed more innovation as business as usual in all aspects of their networks, and we are seeing that through plans for the first set of price controls that will start in April next year. We consulted on the draft NIA allowances in the summer for these sectors and will confirm our position shortly. Third, rather than the automatic annual allowances that link to company revenues, we are setting innovation allowances based on need and the justifications set out in business plans. Part of that assessment is how well the companies have embedded previous innovations into their core operations. Fourth, we are requiring increased coordination between networks and improved public reporting on the innovation activities that they are collectively taking forward and the costs and benefits of the projects that they fund. This will help transparently document successes as well as failures, showing more clearly how successful innovation is being diffused across the industry. And it makes it easier to evidence that the networks are building on the innovation that's been done previously and collectively bringing forward solutions to the key issues we face. A lot of work is going into developing these arrangements, and I suspect that events like this will continue to be one of the many levers in terms of how these learnings are disseminated. I hope this has given you a good sense of how we in Ofgem see the role of innovation in networks and how that can contribute to net zero. I want to end by reminding you of the prize if we make good decisions. If we allow ourselves to dream ahead to the end of the 2020s, when hopefully COVID-19 is consigned to history and we are back enjoying the things that we love doing, There are probably some key outcomes that we would hope to see. In the power sector, a coordinated least cost development of the offshore and onshore transmission networks to support a massive increase in offshore wind capacity, and a system operator fully capable of operating a highly reliable net zero electricity system. In the heat sector, a clear demonstration that a 100% hydrogen network is technically and economically feasible, safe and acceptable to consumers. And for heat networks or electric heat pumps, the local distribution grids are fully prepared to cope with increased demand without any compromise on reliability. And in the transport sector, tangible progress will have been made towards 11 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030, with rapid and least cost development of a comprehensive EV charging network across the country for both long and short journeys, covering home, street and destination charging, and giving consumers both rapid and slower charging options at convenient locations. Back to the here and now, there are some important decisions coming up that will set the foundations for these successes, and at Ofgem we are focused on getting these right. It's not all about us though, and we've got to work at this together to make it happen, hopefully under more favourable conditions in 2021. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have an enjoyable virtual conference. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matthew Bilson. I'm the Deputy Director Energy Innovation Strategy at BEIS, Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Welcome to the Energy Networks Association Innovation Conference, and I hope you enjoyed hearing Minister Kwartan speak earlier about some of the things we are doing. What I want to talk to you about today is what we are doing on the innovation side in particular. And there's really three things I want to cover in my presentation. The first is to recap on where we've come from, so if you like, the past. The second thing I want to do is then talk about what we've been doing at the moment, so the current. And then towards the end, I want to talk about the much more exciting activity that we're going to be doing going forward in the future. So first of all, to look at where we've come from. So really slide 2, you can see the history of government's investment in energy research and innovation. What you can see is there was very significant investment in the 1970s and 80s where you had state support for, in particular, nuclear R&D. Moving into the 90s and the early 2000s, however, that slowly faded away. Before you then started to see a resurgence of interest in energy R&D as concerns around climate change started to mount. And overall, I think it's a good news story. So you can see that the investments we're making more recently are the highest it's been for nearly 30 years. And we think that will continue to increase. So some good news, and I think there's very positive messages coming from that. So perhaps that's going back to the 1970s, but in particular now I want to talk about what we've been doing in the last few years to move this agenda forward. So moving on to slide 3, this is much more about the programme that I cover on innovation. You can see at the top there that when the Clean Growth Strategy was published in 2017, the government expected during this period, this 5-year period, that the government would invest about 3 billion in clean energy research and innovation. Of this, my programme is a £500 million portfolio looking at 6 key areas. So across those key areas, you have nuclear, which is about how we can think about investing in manufacturing as well as advanced nuclear technologies. You can see on renewables, we looked to spend a much more modest amount, and that's partly because you've got to remember when we started setting out this portfolio back in 2015-16, this is before net zero, when the targets were still 80%, and we felt that because wind costs were falling so rapidly that actually perhaps there was less need for government to invest in R&D on that area. So that's why that amount is relatively less. Bearing in mind there's also still separate support going through the Catapult network. We have industry and carbon capture and storage research and innovation. We have activity going on in built. Some of the projects there include a 750 home heat pump trial that is just getting going, and then 70 million on smart systems. Also, part of that is including things like vehicle-to-grid activity. So we are co-funding, along with Department for Transport, what is UK's biggest trial on vehicle-to-grid technologies, involving several hundred vehicles, including a bus fleet, which is called the Bus to Go project. So again, very exciting. The sixth area is what we call cross-cutting. And this is where our Successful Energy Entrepreneurs Fund sits. We supported well over 100 SMEs to come up with quite exciting technologies, which then often go on to attract further investment under other activities. So that's kind of setting out the broad scope. So what has this delivered? Because we're coming to the end of this program now. So the next slide shows you the breadth and the scale of what our program is doing. So overall, we're funding about 450 projects. More than 700 organisations have been involved, and nearly over 2/3 of those organisations have been small and medium enterprises. It also involves large companies as well as academics. So we do see that academic sector has a role to play in nearer market innovation. You can see from the pie chart below that are the different areas, the different types of projects we've been funding. So as well as more desk-based and field-based studies, it also starts moving into the development testing, the trials, and the nearer term deployment tests that technologies often need to break into the markets. So a rapid and a large scale of activities that we cover. So what I was going to do was really just talk about a few of these projects, because obviously I can't cover in the time available all 450 projects that we're involved in. So it's really what I want to do now is give you a taste, a flavour of the more exciting projects. First of all, I was going to talk about the larger scale projects that we have under the portfolio. So these are just two of them, both of them certainly the first in the UK, the first in Europe, and even pretty innovative in the world scale. So first of all, Highview Power. This is an SME set up. It's been going for a couple of years now, and we supported some of its previous iterations. Under the current iteration, we're supporting it with a £10 million grant to build a 50 megawatt scale liquid air storage facility in Manchester. And they announced just a couple of weeks ago that they've broken ground on starting the construction of this site. As you can see, it says the Cryo battery, this kind of name for this type of technology, will be one of Europe's largest energy storage systems, and one of the first in the world to demonstrate this kind of technology. The reason why we are so interested in this is because we know that longer term duration storage will be absolutely key for integrating renewable technologies into our grid. So a very exciting project. On the right, you can see a project we've got going with Tata Chemicals to construct the first carbon capture and use demonstration plant in Cheshire. Total investment is £17 million. It's supported by just over £4 million from us. It will be and is the UK's largest carbon capture project to date, and the first one that's really going beyond pilot scale activity, and it will capture 40,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide a year to feed into their plant. Again, that one has also broken ground, and you can see online some of the exciting time-lapse videos, so you can see construction proceeding, which is very exciting. So two big projects that we're funding, to give you a flavour of the scale of what we're doing. I'll next move on to some of the other projects we've got, which are a slightly smaller scale, but of a different type, and perhaps one of the more interesting ones for the audience. I know we've got from the DNOs as well. So the next project is one called Smart Step. What this is trying to do is look at how you can make EV charging, on-street EV charging, smarter. So this involves Element Energy, Octopus, Trojan, and Landis & Gyr. And this builds on charging points that Trojan is developing, which is being supported by our colleagues at Innovate UK. And you can see it there. It's called the Trojan Lance, which will sit flush to the ground, and then it will essentially pop up. Our added bit to this project is about this thing about how to make it smarter. So how do you enable consumers to use their apps and their phones to not only charge their car, but then also making sure that charging happens perhaps when the electricity to the grid is cheaper. So this is at the feasibility stage at the moment, and we expect it to proceed to phase 2, which is the demonstrator, where we will see about 100 of these smart Trojan Lancers being rolled out in London later next year now. So a very exciting project. The next one I'll talk about is around demand side response. So we've got several demand side response projects going on, several £1 million going in overall. We've got a chunk of demand side response projects going on with our domestic setting. We've also got a couple in the non-domestic setting. So these are just a couple of them, just 2 of them. So one involves a company called Grid Imp, and they are working with a school, Wells Cathedral School, to really roll out some of their DSR products. And as you can see there, they've already been making savings of about a £10,000 refund and a saving on the procurement of that. Another project is Flextricity, so a very innovative company based up in Scotland, and they've been rolling out their products and process with a range of industrial partners, including food stocking companies. And again, they're getting on in earnest. The project is due to finish later next year. There's been some couple of delays during COVID, but they're already showing some really exciting outcomes from their project. So that's again a snapshot of the demand side response aspects of some of the portfolio. Next one is around Piclo. So I'm sure many of you heard of Piclo. Again, it's a company we supported through several grants over our program. The one we're looking at here is Piclo Flex, the Piclo exchange, and we're supporting with over £500,000 from our portfolio. And this is really thinking about how do you set up a flexibility marketplace where different aggregators, different providers can trade in their flexibility, which then goes out into the market. Piclo think this will be one of Europe's largest demonstrators of flexibility exchange, and again, it's very just getting going in earnest, and we hope to see more of this going forward, which I'll touch upon. So that's a flavour of several of our projects in our current £500 million portfolio. I would say if you want to hear about some of the more the gas side, the hydrogen side of our program, then do tune in to my colleague Mark Taylor, who looks over that half of the portfolio. He's talking later on at the conference about hydrogen for heat, some exciting things we've been doing to develop new boilers, supporting Worcester Bosch and Bosch, and Baxi to develop their boilers. So do tune in for that. So I've covered about the past, I've talked about the current, or what's happening in the future. So I'm sure many of you heard about the Prime Minister's very exciting announcements just a couple of weeks ago around the 10-point plan. This covers a broad range of activities. Some of the headline grabbing ones were, of course, the phase out of fossil fuel cars by 2030. Some of you amongst you, your BDIs may have spotted that there was the 10th point was around green finance and innovation. And within that, there was an announcement that the government will launch a new £1 billion, at least £1 billion, zero innovation portfolio going forward from next year. I'm very pleased, very proud that we will be leading this. It is the next phase of the program I've been talking about. And it's a testament to some of the really exciting outcomes and insights we're getting, that we're being trusted with taxpayers' money to now expand the program going forward over the next 5 years. So you can see on the slide some of the areas we've set out as our priorities for this portfolio going forward. I probably won't speak about all of these portfolios, but you can see that one of those is energy storage and flexibility. We've committed that we'll be investing at least £100 million of our billion on that And again, some of the things we want to do even more on are thinking about long duration and large scale energy storage. So moving beyond lithium ion batteries in particular, not including pumped hydro, because we think that's an established technology, but what are the more exciting technologies? How can we scale up some of these even further in the next few years? And like I was talking about Piccolo, how we can move forward even more around our flexibility aspects. Some of the other aspects you may be interested in are floating offshore wind. Again, we're thinking about with wind and floating offshore wind, how we can integrate that into the grid even more, possibly involving hydrogen. And then under our built environment, so on heat pumps, elsewhere in the 10-point plan, there was this very ambitious announcement of 600,000 heat pump target later in the decade. So again, we're thinking about the more innovative aspects of the heat pumps, how do heat pumps integrate into the network, how do you make smart heat pumps, and other things like that. So I would say if you've got ideas, if you're working with any companies who you think need a bit more innovation support through grants or anything else, please do get in touch with us. We're intending to roll this program out pretty rapidly. As they will start really in earnest from April next year, but we expect to be saying a bit more about it ahead of that. So do get in touch with us. It is really an exciting opportunity to set out and accelerate what we need to do on net zero, and working with the networks is part of that. I would also refer you to what Ofgem were talking about earlier. Many of you have seen the proposals of reforming RIIO-2, and within that, their proposals are around a strategic innovation fund. And I would say we're very keen in looking at how this £1 billion fund from BEIS can perhaps work with Ofgem and the Strategic Innovation Fund to achieve some really groundbreaking, innovative, large-scale projects to really set the pace going forward, so we can make sure we hit our net zero targets. So I'll end there. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to building even more productive relationships with you all going forward as we embark on this next stage of our activity on innovation. Thank you very much.
Good morning and welcome to this panel discussion, Enabling Net Zero, Decarbonising the Energy System. I'm Guy Newey. I'm Director of Strategy and Performance at the Energy Systems Catapult. Energy Systems Catapult, for those of you who don't know, is an innovation agency helping companies transition and navigate the way to net zero. And net zero, as we all know, is a profound change of our economy. Changes in how we travel, how we heat our homes, what we eat, and of course that means significant changes to our energy system, to our power system, the energy markets, how we regulate our markets. It really is an incredibly exciting time to be thinking about energy, and at the centre of that transition is our networks. And so how they are going to help manage that transition, enable that transition, as the discussion sets out, is a really important question for us to grapple with. And you're talking about potentially a very different set of responsibilities and requirements for the networks, as well as different technology change. And at the same time, we've got the kind of the digital transition, or the digital enablement in energy, landing on top of this energy system and understanding how that's going to work. So these twin forces of decarbonisation and digitalisation are going to be a real challenge for us. And that we've got a fantastic panel to explore these issues. We've got Nigel Turvey, who's DSO and Future Networks Manager at WPD. Crucially for this discussion, he's chair of the Open Networks project at the ENA, looking at what a smart grid is going to mean for the networks. We've got Chris Train, who many of you will know as the former CEO of Cadent, long career at Cadent and National Grid, now in charge of or playing a crucial role in the Gas Goes Green. Excuse me. project and thinking about the transition to low carbon gases and what that might mean for the network. And finally, we've got Claire Ditka, Head of Strategy at National Grid. Claire's going to talk about some of the sector coupling issues as well as various other factors. Claire's kind of in many ways been at the coal face. Not sure if that's the right phrase anymore for energy when thinking about these issues. Thinking about how the system operates without coal on the system, as well as an active and vibrant participant in Twitter. So we're going to explore various issues around these questions. And thinking of Twitter, we want as many questions coming in. So encouragement, please to put your questions to the right of the screen, I think in the Q&A box, and we'll answer them as we're going live. Right, I'm going to ask each panelist to speak for a few minutes on their particular subject. Then we'll have a bit of a discussion and then be answering the questions as we go along. So I'm going to hand over first to Nigel.
Thank you for that, Guy. Yeah, well, as Guy said, I'm Nigel Servey, the DSO and Future Networks Manager at Western Power Distribution. And I'm here really as chair of the Open Networks Steering Group. Now, the networks company's role is to ensure the network is ready to allow the connection of a range of low carbon technologies, including electric vehicles, heat pumps, storage, renewable generation, to allow the delivery of a net zero future. In this role, it's important that we act as a neutral market facilitator to ensure that solutions are selected on the basis of the most economic outcome for customers and the UK. Now, the Open Network project has been running for a number of years to help deliver that, along with sharing best practice and drive towards consistent implementation across network companies. Last year, we published our flexibility commitment, and our work is delivering in all areas of that. But I'd just like to highlight a few areas. Providing sort of accurate, user-friendly, comprehensive information to the market and signposting the future requirements to allow those markets to develop is key. This is really being facilitated by the development of common future energy scenario framework to give visibility of the likely range of demand and generation that will need to be accommodated in the future. We have developed and implemented a common DSO contract for the procurement of flexibility, and I'm now expanding that to encompass ESO requirements. So that providers face common products, terms, conditions whenever they provide them to the network. This is facilitating the growth in flexible markets and which do need to be simple, fair, transparent to encourage participation. In addition, in the areas of flexibility, we're working to harmonise procurement processes, parameters specified for active power services, as well as how to facilitate non-DSO services, such as peer-to-peer trading. A concern raised by stakeholders is the interaction between active network management, a system designed to allow quicker, lower cost connections, particularly for distributed generation, which is compensated for by the lower cost of connection and faster connection, and that of contracted flexibility, which is mainly compensated for at the time of use. This will be a significant focus of work in the coming year to ensure that a fair and transparent arrangements are in place. In the area of our direct interface with customers seeking connection to the network, work this year has included harmonisation of both queue management and interactive processes. In addition, we've also been working on the interface between DSOs and the ESO, and joint development and understanding of each other's usage of flexibility is important to avoid conflicts in our action, offsetting each other to overall ensure best value for customers. More recently, we expanded the work within the open networks to go beyond electricity networks and consider a more whole system approach encompassing gas networks, as there are now many linkages between the two networks. Several areas are in development, including whole system cost-benefit analysis, real-time operations and forecasting, along with whole system future energy scenarios. Finally, open data is essential going forward to help others develop services apps and other products to help the UK deliver a net zero future. And we have started this via the production of the embedded capacity register, publication of planned tenders for flexibility and volumes of those contracted, along with work being undertaken by the data working group to establish a digital system map that will show energy network data that can be overlaid with other geographic data sets. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. So just a reminder, if you've got specific questions or clarification, or you want to challenge anything that Nigel said, use the Q&A box, and I'm sure he'll respond rapidly, and no doubt others will chip in as well. Great. Over to Chris.
Thank you, Guy. Gas Goes Green is the programme to deliver the world's first zero carbon grid, substituting natural gas with hydrogen, biomethane and bio-SNG. The programme brings together the expertise of the 5 network gas networks with policy experts, industry and academia. Net zero has really been a game changer in changing to net zero from the previous target of 80-20. We've really set out that ambition with nowhere to hide. And so companies have really stepped up their game over the last 12 months. There's no silver bullet. Delivering net zero requires investment in both gas and electricity networks. 85% of homes in the UK rely on gas for heating, hot water and cooking. And the gas network at peak transports 4 to 5 times more energy than the electricity network. And that's a demonstration, I think, of the scale of the task of decarbonising heat. Household carbon emissions need to reduce from around 3 tonnes today to 135 kilograms by 2050 in order to reach net zero. So hydrogen is critical to the decarbonisation of heat. There's no realistic scenario of achieving net zero without it. And we saw in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan that recognition of the role of hydrogen and decarbonising our energy system for the delivery of net zero. So we've been working very closely over the last year with BEIS, Ofgem, the supply chain, and other key stakeholders to demonstrate that engineering, technical and safety case elements of the acceptability of hydrogen replacing natural gas in our energy system. Key to that has been the delivery of innovation and ambition in order to demonstrate that this is an option in terms of delivering for the future. And it's probably key to recognise that actually by doing that, we're delivering customer choice and we're delivering resilience to the energy system, as well as the opportunity to deliver jobs. So our ambition is to have a safe, efficient and resilient energy system, which is what we have today, but translating that into the future in a decarbonised energy system.
Thanks, Chris. No doubt there will be some challenging discussion of some of those issues that you raised in that section. We'll come back to that after Claire's presented. Claire, over to you.
Thanks, Guy. As you said in your introduction, National Grid has got quite a privileged position where we're at the heart of a lot of the transformation and also sitting across gas and electricity. So in terms of interconnectivity and looking across systems, decarbonising the economy is an intersectional issue. We, I think, should be thinking about whole systems. So it's been mentioned, I think, by everyone so far. For me, whole system means looking horizontally as well as vertically. So looking across the different vectors of energy, of power, heat and transport, and then also looking vertically from production all the way through to supply. And I do think that one of the things that we need to shift to in order to take that whole system view and really think about this issue in an intersectional way is to start looking at outcomes rather than inputs. So traditionally, we've always talked about electricity networks or gas networks. Ofgem's duties talk about regulating the electricity networks and the gas networks. What we actually need to be talking about is providing the outcome that the consumers that we are providing our product to actually consume. So whether that's heating their home, heat for a process that they're running, or being able to power their mode of transport. Having said all of that, and that I really think this is an intersectional issue, I do think that decarbonising the power networks are the key to unlocking the wider energy system decarbonisation. So through rapid decarbonisation of the power system, we can achieve a lot in terms of reduction of carbon emissions anyway, just on its own. But by decarbonising the power system, we then enable the unlocking of the heat system and the transport system as well, both in a very direct way in terms of electrification of heat and of transport, but actually also through decarbonising the power system, we need things like interseasonal storage, where I think hydrogen has a really important part to play. So by leading the way with that, it provides, support and a route for a hydrogen market to start to develop. I think Nigel mentioned, but there's several factors underpinning this. So data is absolutely key. Data needs to be open access. We need to be able to cope with the amount of data that will flow, but also the consumer. So we mustn't fall into the trap of designing a system of the future from an engineering perspective, or even from a data scientist perspective, or even, you may disagree with this guy, but from a systems engineering perspective, have to think about the person that's going to use the end product and think about what works for them.
Thanks very much, Claire. And of course, a good systems engineer would also be thinking about the consumer as an important part of the system. So we need to think about that. Okay, some really interesting points raised in the discussion there. So, talk to me, Claire. You mentioned the importance of focusing on outcomes, and easy thing to say, and I think probably most people would agree. How does that work in practice when you're thinking about regulation and other and issues like that? What needs to happen in order for that to be enabled?
Well, I think so. You kind of got to the nub of one of the big issues with this, which is if we think about outcomes, the paths to get to those outcomes are really complicated and they cross multiple sectors and there's different routes and nothing at the minute is certain. So how do you look across the entire system and design your way to the outcome without making it such a mammoth problem that you can't solve it? So my belief is that we just need to start trying. So as well as whole systems, another phrase that is talked about a lot is agile working, but I think this is the way forward for this. So traditionally within the energy network space, I think we've very much tried to design an end solution and answer all of the questions and know all of the pitfalls and come up with options to them. And that just won't work here because there's too many questions about existing technologies. Who knows what new technologies might arise? So there is a little bit of, we just need to keep incrementally trying things and see how they go until you get to the point where you have to make a decision. So that's critical. You need to know what your point or your line in the sand is where you need to make a decision and go one way or the other. But I think some of the projects that the ENA is doing, so the Open Networks and Gas Goes Green, are really important in helping that route in terms of testing things and trying things out, see what works. Okay, that doesn't work, let's adjust it, let's try it. And that's more of that kind of agile, incremental way, rather than designing the end solution for the original problem that you've identified.
Thanks for that. Nigel, how's the Open Networks project looking at this question? You've obviously got a set of different regulatory arrangements at different times, kind of staggered for all sorts of sensible historical reasons. But how is the Open Networks project thinking about what might need to change in that set of arrangements in order to think across the different systems that we're talking about?
Well, I mean, I think as I mentioned, part of the work is looking at how we can facilitate other markets as well, and that depends on availability of data, particularly about our networks, to be able to let people see what's possible. When you get into realms like peer-to-peer trading, which is a potential outcome that I know a lot of people are looking at. What people need is data on the capability of the network to enable that, and hence they're going to need virtually live data feeds at relatively local levels. That's quite a challenge, and it's an area we're beginning to look at, but we've certainly started at the higher levels in terms of what data we can make available externally, and trying to reduce, if you like, the timescales between what has largely been historic data to date to move more to real time, and to provide reasonable forecasts of what we think might happen in the future and what capacity is going to be available.
And how far are we off that world with much more real time data? Obviously, other sectors, other areas have been able to deliver that. What's changing in energy? And particularly from the network side, which is opening that up, and what more needs to be done to unlock that?
We're doing a lot of work at the moment across the industry of looking at where we need to put measurement on the system, what we can do in terms of sort of state estimation where we don't have measurement, and also there is an important interface with things like the smart metering program. Now, there are obviously challenges in that in terms of data privacy, but they're all ones that we're trying to tackle and look at to see how quickly we can get there. I mean, speaking more from just WPD's viewpoint, I mean, we've recently put some data out on our website, which is the sort of live data feed of demand and generation we're seeing on the network. It's at a very high level at the moment, and the intent is to progressively increase the granularity of that. And I think that's the sort of route we need to go down, is making that data open and available. And we need to supplement that with the capacity, capability of networks, and also the flexibility that appears to be available in certain locations, so that we can actually demonstrate, what the network's capable of doing to allow people to undertake all these different services and produce outputs for customers, as was being said, in terms of, they want to be able to charge a car, they want to be able to drive a car, so it's how long can you charge for and where, how do they heat their homes, if we're on electric heating, it's those sorts of things that they're the outcomes people are actually looking for.
And Chris, when you're thinking about the Gas Goes Green project, how is that kind of trying to adopt that whole, thinking about the whole system? Because the project's called Gas Go Green. It's not called all gas. We might not use as much of it, and we might use a bit more electricity, and but the bit that we have left might go green. I can understand why it might not be called that project. But how are you making sure you think across the different systems and vectors we're talking about?
It's really, as I'm going to concur with Claire. She might not want me to, but it is about thinking about what customer outcomes are And one of the challenges, I think, when we've historically looked at the decarbonisation of the energy system, is that we've expected customers to change their behaviours and change their needs and change their wants in line with what we think is the right delivery of an energy system. Whereas I think we have to think about those customer outcomes, what customers want and what they need. And then we need to deliver the smart energy system behind that. And that will be the integration of the electricity and the gas networks. And producing hydrogen, whether it's blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, will require a real integration with the electricity and the electricity supply. The two markets come together, I think, in the future in a way that they never have historically in the past. And covering off that regulatory question, I think we do need an energy regulator around the networks that is thinking about those whole system, whole energy outcomes. And there are parts of the system where hydrogen is not going to be the answer. And a more localized planning approach is going to really deliver that outcome. Cadent recently produced some work along with North West, looking at the decarbonisation of Greater Manchester. And that was a great example, I think, of the energy companies coming together to help the framework, to help the Metro Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, actually deliver a vision of the outcome, of the achievement of net zero. So I think it's absolutely essential that the two energy networks come together. Both require investment. The energy landscape will look very different in the future. But I think it's actually very helpful that both networks come under the Energy Network Association. So some of those historical areas where people might have felt there was conflict between the two energy sources or competition, actually we need to greatly collaborate together in terms of delivering that transformed energy system of the future.
And Chris, is that so? I completely take the point on the role of the ENA, and it's a great advantage that it's not the Electricity Networks Association and the Gas Networks Association somewhere else entrenching that, and it's been good to see that going forward. Is that enough? What does Ofgem and the government need to do in this space to ensure that it's not kind of voluntary bottom up, or is that enough? Is that going to help us really navigate the way between these different systems?
So the critical bit for me is that the government need to set out that policy vision, which then enables Ofgem to put the mechanisms in place that help to deliver that transition in terms of the future. And having Ofgem thinking about the holistic energy system and not just gas network control and electricity network control, I think will be really helpful. But it comes from that policy direction and then the regulator enabling networks to invest and to deliver those choices and those outcomes. And there is a difference where in the phase in terms of gas demonstration, of actually demonstrating the technologies, demonstrating the engineering, which will enable the policymakers make those decisions. But if you go back and look at the decarbonisation of electricity generation, sending that signal to the market, giving a clear objective to the market, allowed the supply chain the confidence to invest. And we moved from £130 a megawatt for offshore wind down to around £38 a megawatt today. And that is delivering confidence to the supply chain to invest.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just change tack a bit now. I'm going to ask each of you about what you see as the biggest risk to the transition. We've all kind of mentioned the pace of what over the next 30 years. Let's not do some years. Over the next 30 years to deliver net zero. But from a networks point of view and the projects you're working on, what are the biggest what are the biggest risks to that happening? And another way, of course, might be putting it, what's the biggest innovation opportunities to think about it? Claire, I'll come to you first.
I think for me, I know we have all mentioned pace, but for me, the biggest risk is that we try and wait for absolute certainty before we take action, and we just don't have time to do that. And also, realistically, are we ever going to find absolute certainty? So 30 years is a long time. Technology will move on a lot, and I think we need to just flex the boundaries of how we've worked in the future, where we've talked about making sure there's an absolute needs case and being very certain on requirements, to accepting that in order to hit the targets and work at pace, we're going to have to bring some risk into the process. And then that means that you need to work more innovatively. So technology trials, regulatory trials, but you need to be prepared to drop things and be confident that you can drop things without being penalised, if that makes sense. So if you try a new technology, or you adjust some regulatory rules to try and remove some barriers, and it doesn't have the outcomes that you intended, then you go, okay, that didn't work. By acting now, we've got time to do that, and we've got time to try things, and then if they don't work, do something else. But if we wait until everything's certain to try and avoid those kinds of outcomes, then we just won't hit the target.
Excellent points in there, Nigel. What are you worrying about, both in or the thing that's hardest when you think about the Open Network project, or in WPD's business?
Oh, well, I probably do tend towards some of the technology issues and such like. It very much is that data management, data collection, data management, which brings in, the manipulation of that data, availability of it, but also the availability of communication systems to actually move this data around. There's many of our sites are quite remote in terms of the larger substations, and getting communications to those, particularly over radio type networks, and spectrum availability is a challenge as we go forwards. So that's an area of concern. I think just bringing customers with us, it is that, persuading them that we will be ready. There will be the availability to connect the electric vehicle charging network, and it will work, so that they have the confidence that electric vehicles will be able to be charged when they need to be, and hence they were prepared to move to those different technologies. I think they are the challenges. It's very much that customer focus, ensuring we give good customer service, we give advance notice of the availability of capacity on the network. All those things are going to be important going forward.
And how quickly, just to come back on, you mentioned the kind of the data challenge, the communications challenge, which a few people have mentioned. Now, how significant has the transformation been over the last couple of years? I mean, if you compare it to 5 years ago when thinking about data and communication, what does that actually look like within a network business in terms of the shift of attention? Lots of people talk about it, but what's it actually meaning in terms of how the business is changing?
Well, I mean, it's changing in terms of the data. It's changing very rapidly. I mean, we've gone from sort of data being known to be important to it's now sort of right near the top of the agenda, in terms of we've actually changed some of the organisation internally to bring those data elements together, to come up with a sort of digitalisation data strategies. So we look forward to the future. How do we harmonise different data sets? Historically, having them separate between what's on network data and demand data hasn't been as critical to sync everything together as it is now. And so we're doing a lot of work on that, on creating comprehensive data catalogues so that we have better availability of that data and being able to share it. And in terms of sort of communications, we've done a huge amount in terms of better linkages between sites, trying to improve that, trying to find a combination of both land sort of fibre type connections as well as the better use of our radio systems, and updating all those to digital systems as well, as happened in more recent times as well.
Thanks, Nigel. Chris, what do you see as the biggest risk, challenge, opportunity, whichever end of the telescope you want to look at it from?
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I mean, for me, the biggest risk is a lack of ambition, and and that leading to to inaction. And 2050 sounds like it's a long way off, but when you look at the scale of the change that we need to make in that time, we need to start acting now. We need to start setting that timeline now and providing those incentives. So alongside that, I think the one of the biggest challenge for us is not demonstrated joined up energy system, and continuing to try and almost pretend that there is a silver bullet and that there is a solution, and you just have to sit back and wait for it. Whereas the reality is, we need to start setting that direction, starting that enablement, and showing that we are joined up as an industry, both horizontally and vertically, as Claire mentioned earlier on. We need to be very joined up, and I think that allows the innovators to come in and to find those niches in the framework and the system and help to develop the products of the future.
That's brilliant. Right, very, very briefly, just before we finish up here, I'm going to give you each 2 sentences, and short sentences, just to be clear. If you had Jonathan Brearley, Chief Executive of Ofgem, and you had Kwasi Kwarteng, the Energy Minister, right in front of you, to ram home, what would be the ask of him? And I'm going to go in the order of Nigel, then Claire, then Chris. Nigel?
I think it's to make sure that we're able to invest where necessary and develop the processes that are needed to actually do that.
Okay. Claire?
So make sure the regulatory frameworks are stable, predictable and flexible to deal with change, and don't be afraid of investing relatively small amounts of money in new technologies to look for solutions for the way forward.
Chris?
So very similar. Set a very clear direction, be ambitious in that setting that, demonstrate a joined up approach across energy, and recognise what is necessary to create efficient investment in the energy system to deliver net zero.
Fantastic. We'll have to stop it there. I'm sure your questions have been flying in as we've been going. We're hopefully giving some answers for that. You covered a huge amount of territory, data, the pace that we need to go at, the need to not come up with a perfect answer before we get on with stuff, the need for ambition and clear direction, the role of customers and how we actually make sure these solutions work for people in the real world, as well as the better join up that's needed across the whole energy system. I want a huge thanks to our panel for what's been an absolutely fascinating and useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you to today's keynote speakers and panelists. I really appreciate your time and expertise that you shared with us this morning. Now we're moving on to the live exhibition stand session, where I hope you'll take the opportunity to make new connections, network, meet with both our exhibitors and your fellow delegates. Our formal sessions will reconvene at 1 o'clock, and then we're going to have 3 concurrent tracks: gas, electricity, and special sessions. So please do join us again at that time. Thank you.